Hello, everybody. How are you? Thank you so much for being out tonight. My name is Javier Gonzalez, and I have the incredible honor and privilege of being mayor of our incredible city of Santa Fe. I want to begin tonight by thanking members of the City Council who were able to join us tonight. I'll ask them to please stand up, and then we can give a round of applause once I introduce them. Mayor Pro Tem Sig Lindell, City Councilor Renee Villarreal, City Councilor Ron Trujillo, City Councilor Peter Ives. We'd also like to welcome from the County Commissioner, Commissioner Anna Hansen. And of course, the legislators who go and fight for Santa Fe every year, our wonderful legislator, Representative Carl Trujillo. And the great Speaker of the House, Mr. Brian Egoff. I'd also like to acknowledge in the crowd tonight, Marco Cerna, who's with us, our incredible district attorney. Marco, thank you so much. Good evening, Santa Fe.
Good evening.
Time after time, as your mayor, in sadness and in celebration, I've been blown away by our community as we've come together. And looking out at this incredible crowd tonight that represents Santa Fe in all of its diversity, in all of its magic, you have done it again. I have always said that Santa Fe is at its best when we come together as a community. Whether we're looking for peace, for strength, for healing, for progress, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish as a Santa Fe family. Tonight we've come here for the same thing: peace and solace in the face of tragedy, and strength and solidarity as we move forward in a renewed struggle against the forces of evil, hatred, racism, and bigotry. And I hope before the night is over that we have found them in abundance. Tragedy that results from hate touches us all, particularly the communities who have endured ongoing violence well before the outrageous act of terror in Charlottesville this weekend. This tragedy is double not only because it cost lives, but because it happened as a direct result of the hatred that has been nurtured and sheltered by the President of the United States of all people. We have a message for the President tonight from all of us of goodwill. There are not two sides to blame on this issue, period. There are racists, there are white supremacists and neo-Nazis carrying torches through our streets, bullying and degrading and attacking those who stand up to them. And then there are those who oppose them. Only one side has blood on their hands today, Mr. President, and you are leading their ranks. What we are facing isn't anything new. It's the resurfacing of an old and relentless enemy. And we've seen it before in our history of slavery and conquest of Native people, in a civil war fought to abolish either slavery or the Union, in 100 years of segregation and white supremacy, in the marginalization of Native Americans, minorities, members of the LGBT community, immigrants, and other so-called outsiders, and now in the racism and hatred so proudly on display in Charlottesville. And although we have not seen that violence come to our city, we are not immune. This hatred, ignorance, and institutional oppression has only ever led to one place: violence. And now here we are again. And we are not without hope. We have defeated it before, and we can do it again. But Santa Feans, you've got to get in the game, because you can only, and we can only do it together. You've got to use your voice relentlessly to call out the hate. We must speak out against it. To do anything else, to be silent, to back down, to allow ourselves to be bullied into not speaking up, is to be complicit in allowing it to take root and to grow on our watch. And I'm betting, and I know that you will, because I've seen you rise to the occasion so many times before. After this weekend, I've seen a new generation of heroes step into the spotlight. Heroes like those teenagers and those wonderful people from Charlottesville, students at the University of Virginia, who stood up together against an onslaught of white supremacists carrying torches. And of course, heroes like Heather Hare, who we remember here tonight, who has been remembered in hundreds of spontaneous gatherings in cities all over this country. She didn't know that she was giving her life to a cause when she left her house that morning. But she knew doing nothing was not an option. So she marched for justice, sending out a call that each one of us has to answer for ourselves.
Good for her.
Ask yourself, how will you respond? Ask if we have the will, ask if we have the courage to fulfill the promise that in America all people are created equal. Ask if we have the will to give real meaning to the idea that love can conquer hate. I know that together we can, and I know that together we will. But make no mistake, for this movement to succeed, to join the long list of American movements that have overcome everything from slavery to fascism to segregation, I believe that we must succeed in a nonviolent action. We cannot give in to the temptation to meet violence with violence. Instead, we will march our way to victory, rally our way to protest our way to victory, organize our way to victory, and more powerful than any other action we can take, we will vote our way to victory. Mi querido Santa Fe, tonight you've shown you are willing to engage. You have refused to stay silent. You have started our community down the long path toward a more just society, a more open city, and a more loving place than we currently stand. How that journey turns out will be up to all of you. And I cannot thank you enough for the way you have turned out to represent the true Santa Fe tonight. Thank you. God bless you. Now please join me in welcoming up the wonderful Rabbi of Temple Beth Shalom, Rabbi Neil, who leads the wonderful Interfaith Leadership Alliance.
Thank you to everybody for being here. My name is Rabbi Neil from Temple Beth Shalom. I'm also honored to be the president of the Interfaith Leadership Alliance of Santa Fe. Today we gather in memory, in prayer, to hear speakers, to hear music. And to start us, I invite Rashid Hudson to share our first prayer.
Divine voice of reason and love, of compassion and understanding. Open our hearts to others, to their suffering, to their call for help. Give us strength to stand up against those who seek discord. Help us to create a harmonious symphony of diversity in our world. Help us not just to tolerate difference, but to embrace it. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. Hallelujah.
Our second prayer is going to be led for us by Lane Perdue of the Holy Family Episcopal Church.
Let us pray. O God, you are the hope of all the ends of the earth, the God of the spirits of all flesh. Hear our humble intercession for all races and families on the earth, that you will turn all hearts to yourself. Remove from our minds hatred, prejudice, and contempt for those who are not of our own race or color, class, or creed. That departing from everything that estranges and divides, we may, by you, be brought into the unity of spirit, in the bond of peace. Amen.
It's our honor to have Speaker Brian Egoff address us now.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Santa Fe, for coming together and, as the mayor said, showing us all what a wonderful community we are so lucky to live in, and which presents to the rest of the country such a wonderful example of love and faith and coming together, and of the rejection of hate. It is important, I think, for all of us to say very clearly and directly, not just today, but tomorrow and in the weeks and months to come, knowing that what happened in Charlottesville probably is not the last time we will see something like that in the months and years ahead. We must remind ourselves that the racists, the white nationalists, Ku Klux Klan, the anti-Semites, must not be treated by us as people with just a different point of view. Those who espouse those despicable ideas and that ugly ideology need to be shunned, excluded, and reminded in every way that we can that there's no place for them in our society. There's no place for them in this country, and that their ideology and their vicious hatred will not be tolerated by any of us or by any of the good people who love this country, who love our people, who believe in equality and tolerance and love for one another. It is my honor to bring to you a proclamation on behalf of the State House of Representatives, where I am incredibly honored and privileged to serve as the Speaker. I'm joined by Representative Carl Trujillo and Representative Matthew McQueen and others from the Santa Fe delegation this evening. It says, whereas events motivated by hatred and bigotry, including an attack of fatal violence, unfolded in Charlottesville, Virginia on August 12 and 13, 2017, and whereas groups espousing messages of hate and white supremacy gathered to protest the removal of a Confederate monument, and whereas Heather Heyer lost her life to an act of terror while standing up for her beliefs and has been described as a passionate advocate against discrimination, and whereas 2 Virginia State police officers, Lieutenant Jake Cullen and Trooper Burke Bates, lost their lives in the line of duty as they provided safety for the people of Virginia and Charlottesville. And whereas New Mexicans can honor those lives lost and comfort all those who experience hate and bigotry with our own message of love, safety, and acceptance. And whereas the United States of America and the state of New Mexico can only be strong when held together by the belief that all people are equal. And whereas the Santa Fe community is gathered here today, August 14, 2017, to stand united against racism, intolerance, bigotry, and white supremacy. Now therefore be it resolved that the New Mexico House of Representatives of the state of New Mexico expresses its heartfelt condolences to the friends and loved ones of Ms. Heyer, Lieutenant Cullen, and Trooper Pilot Bates. Now therefore be it further resolved that the New Mexico House of Representatives condemns the acts of violence, terror, hatred, bigotry, racism, and white supremacy that occurred in Charlottesville. And now therefore be it further resolved that the House of Representatives in the state of New Mexico stands united with Santa Fe today and forever in unity against racism and to promote equality, fairness, and injustice. Thank you all very much.
We are honored to have Byron Treaster and Cedric Page from the Santa Fe branch of the NAACP to speak to us.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Cedric Page. I'm the past president of the branch here in Santa Fe of the NAACP. I think it's important to start first with our mission as an organization that is focused on combating racial hatred and racial discrimination. The mission of the NAACP is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. That is our mission. That is our direction as an organization. I spent a good part of last week visiting family back in Virginia and New York State. And those family members that I visited, those family members with whom I visited were veterans. And I see we have veterans in our... I'm gonna, how's that? All right. So, in my travels last week to visit family back east, I visited with cousins, with friends who are veterans. I too am a veteran, as is my wife. And I mention that because of the commitment that we took when we enlisted or took our commissions in the military many years ago, obviously. And I also reflected on the challenges that they met while serving their country, while supporting and defending the Constitution. So those thoughts have been on my mind since I returned yesterday to Santa Fe. The contributions of veterans have been contributions to support the kinds of principles and values that we're here to recognize and to celebrate tonight. So I just wanted to share that with you and to encourage all of you who are veterans, who are family members of veterans, to remind them that the oath that we took is to support and defend the Constitution of this country, as well as the rights and privileges of all of us as Americans. I'll close with just one comment, and it's one of the 6 principles of nonviolence that Dr. King shared with all of us during his lifetime and his efforts to bring about racial justice in this country. I'm not going to read all 6. I encourage you to do a little research and look at the other 5. But the one that stands out tonight is principle number 5. Nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight, and now I'll turn it over to our current president, Byron Treaster.
Where's the governor?
Who cares?
Are you my foil out there?
Putting the governor down.
Of course, Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy of nonviolent protest is so important today. We must not counter violence with violence. A pundit recently said that if we were to do that, we would just give oxygen to the white supremacist movement. So it's crucial to the NAACP that we step forward and triple our vocal opposition to racism and other extremism, but in a peaceful way. We must voice our opposition not only to racism, but to gender bias, to religious intolerance, to bigotry against our indigenous peoples, against bigotry to our disabled, against bigotry to our LGBTQIA community. And to anyone else who is marginalized by our society and our current government. We cannot be silent. We must not be silent. Bear in mind, when good people are silent in a situation like this, that will make hatred acceptable, and we cannot tolerate that.
Absolutely.
It's also essential that we hold our politicians accountable, all the way up to the White House. For their silence, for their lack of compassion, and for, yes, some of their, many or all of their extreme positions on important policies. Stand up to them, write them, call them, and vote. Vote every time. And let's have an honest discussion about racism and bigotry. Yes, with our family, with our friends, our co-workers, our neighbors. I know that's not easy, but I think we can do that in a clear, firm, loving way. We have to reach across the aisle and communicate with these folks, and if we can change one heart, it makes it all worthwhile. And we need to demand more town halls, and go to them, attend those town halls, and maybe a little bit less shouting at the town halls would be a good thing. But let's get those politicians out communicating one-on-one with us. Let's demand that our government expand educational opportunities, including pre-K. Let's demand more job opportunities. Expand job training programs.
When?
We can afford it. We're the richest country in the world. We can afford health insurance for every, affordable health insurance for every citizen in this country. If small countries like Switzerland and Belgium and the list goes on can afford it, we can. Tolerance must be taught. Inclusiveness for all must be modeled by us. Our schools are teaching our children not to bully and not to marginalize other students. But as parents, we have our part to do. We have to teach our children as well. Please, please do that. This is where bigotry starts when we're young. We have to teach tolerance and inclusiveness. Two more things. Call out those who are anti-science. Call out those who are against climate change. History will show that's one of the most bigoted positions to the poor. History will show that. Yes, we shall overcome.
the New Mexico Peace Choir.
We sing for Shalom Amani, Shalom Amani, Shalom Amani, peace. Now we sing for Shalom Amani, Shalom Amani, Shalom Amani, peace. Now we sing for
Representing the Catholic community, Father Adam Ortega Ioki.
You know, today we celebrated the feast of St. Maximilian Kolbe, and he died in a concentration camp in Auschwitz, dying against hatred, and especially for all that stands for. And so, on behalf of our Catholic community, let us remember we're in the holy presence of God. Heavenly Father, you created us all one. We are your sons and daughters. We ask you to be with our communities, that we may work tirelessly to root out hatred, and especially racism, beginning in our own homes, our own communities, and radiating far and wide. We lift up to you the community now in Charlottesville, but there are many others deep within our own country who experience this hatred. Help us to be your instruments of peace in every way. Help us to quench the evil of racism and any hatred, for you are a loving God, and invite us to love in every way, especially by our words and our actions. We ask this in your holy name, now and forever. Amen.
Amen.
We share a reading by Walema Kwanza Natele.
Good evening, everybody. People are hungry, and they have a right to be. We shall not fool ourselves into thinking that this violence only affects those whose name have appeared on TV or in the newspaper. African Americans are twice as likely to be arrested and almost 4 times as likely to experience the use of force during encounters with the police. African American and Latino comprise well over half of all prisoners. Even though African American and Latinos make up approximately only 1/4 of the total US population. We are far from eradicating racism in this country. Today, in America, if you are black, you can be killed for getting a packet of Skittles during the basketball game, or murdered in your church while you are praying. This violence fills us with outrage, disgust, and deep, deep sadness. These hateful acts of violence amount to acts of terror. They are perpetrated by extremists who want to intimidate and terrorize black, brown, and indigenous people in this country. It is an outrage that is, in this early 21st century, we are seeing intolerable acts of violence being perpetrated by police and racist acts of terrorism by white supremacists. Weeks before his death, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke to a union group in New York about what he called the other America. When America is flowing with the milk of prosperity and the honey of equality, King said that America is the habitat of millions of people who have food and material necessity for their bodies, culture, and education, for their mind, freedom, and human dignity for their spirit. But as we assemble here tonight, I'm sure that each of us is painfully aware of the fact that there is another America, and the other America has a daily ugliness about it that transforms the buoyancy of hope into fatigue of despair. But what King saw in 1968 and what we all should recognize today is that if necessary, to try to address the rampant economic inequality while also taking on the issue of societal racism. We must at the same time address the structural and institutional racism which exists in this country, while at the same time we vigorously attack the grossest level of income and wealthy inequality which is making the very rich much richer while everyone else, especially those in our minority community, are becoming poor. Despite all the challenge, Reverend King believed in a day when justice will roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. He believed in a day when freedom would ring for all. He believed in us. We must not fail it. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Good for him.
Reverend Talitha Arnold from the United Church of Santa Fe is going to lead us in a song.
St. Augustine said that they who sing pray twice. We've heard a lot of prayers. We're going to sing a prayer. It's called This Little Light of Mine. It's a prayer that was born in the shadowed days of slavery, a prayer that gave people hope in that very, very difficult and dark time. It's a prayer that was sung by Martin Luther King Jr. and everyone else in the civil rights movement that united people of all different ages, tongues, races, backgrounds in this country. And it's a prayer that came to mind for me last night as I was reading and watching the accounts of people bearing tiki torches to proclaim who they were. Well, you know what? This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine, and I hope you will too. It goes like this. Sing along with me. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Won't let no one get out. I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let hatred get out. I'm gonna let it shine. Won't let hatred get out. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Shine it all around this world. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine it all around this world. I'm gonna let it shine. Shine it all around this world. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Amen.
Our last reading is to be led for us by Blaine Wimberley from Zia United Methodist Church.
Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched side by side with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, wrote, in the words of William Lloyd Garrison, I will be as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. On the subject of racism, I do not wish to think, speak, or write with moderation. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard. Religion and race, how can these be uttered together? To act in the spirit of religion is to unite what lies apart, to remember that humanity as a whole is God's beloved child. To act in the spirit of race is to sunder, slash, and dismember the flesh of living humanity. Is this the way to honor a father, to torture his child? Race as a normative legal or political concept is capable of expanding to formidable dimensions. A mere thought, it extends to become a way of thinking, a highway of insolence, as well as a standard of values, overriding truth, justice, beauty. As a standard of values and behavior, race operates as a comprehensive doctrine, as racism. And racism is worse than idolatry. Racism is unmitigated evil. Few of us seem to realize how insidious, how radical, how universal and evil racism is. Few of us realize that racism is our gravest threat to other people. The maximum of hatred for a minimum of reason. The maximum of cruelty for a minimum of thinking. To think of a person in terms of white, black, or yellow is more than an error. It is an eye disease, a cancer of the soul. The redeeming quality of a person lies in one's ability to sense kinship with all people. Yet there's a deadly poison that inflames the eye, making us see the generality of race, but not the uniqueness of the human face. How many disasters do we have to go through in order to realize that all of humanity has a stake in the liberty of one person? What begins as inequality of some inevitably ends as inequality for all. There is an evil which most of us condone and are even guilty of, indifference to evil. We remain neutral, impartial, and not easily moved by the wrongs done to other people. Indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. It is more universal, more contagious, more dangerous. A silent justification, it makes possible an evil erupting as an exception, becoming the rule, and being in turn accepted. The prophet's great contribution to humanity was the discovery of the evil of indifference. All prophecy is one great exclamation. God is not indifferent to evil. God is always concerned. God is personally affected by what we do to each other. That equality is a good thing, a fine goal, may be generally accepted. What is lacking is a sense of the monstrosity of inequality. Seen from the perspective of prophetic faith, the predicament of justice is the predicament of God.
Amen.
It falls to me to round off this extraordinary rally against racism. And I want to thank all of you here. My children are here. And I just want to thank all of you for showing them how many people will stand up against hatred. I have a question for you to answer out loud. Which is easier, racism or love? Love! The answer is love. It has to be love. I believe this because racism is learned behavior. No baby comes out of the womb racist. They learn with their eyes closed to attach to those immediately near to them. Love is natural. But then we learn to be racist. We learn from our fear. We learn from our mistrust of anyone different. We learn racism. And if we learn racism, we can unlearn racism. But we have to acknowledge that we have learned racism. We have to acknowledge that our society has learned racism, that it has tolerated racism, that it has taught racism, that it thrives off racism. And we have to acknowledge that in order to change it. We can no longer stand idly by as racists fill the streets of this country and threaten other people.
And the White House.
Because when they threaten others, they threaten us all. This is not a white world. This is not a white country. This world belongs to everyone. Everyone should have an equal opportunity to get ahead in this world, in this country, and in this wonderful city. That is the world that we need to create. That is the country that we need to create. And that is the city that we need to create. It would be easy for us to give up, to see the enormity of the task that we face, the task of eradicating racism, of unlearning racism. It would be easy to turn a blind eye to the racism in our society. But we are all here today to commit ourselves to say, we will not do that. We will not turn a blind eye to racism. We are here to say that we stand against racism in all its insidious forms. We are here because we believe that our society must be improved, can be improved, will be improved, and that we will improve it. To quote Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who we heard before, who marched right next to Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, what we face is a human emergency. It will require much devotion, wisdom, and divine grace to eliminate that massive sense of inferiority, the creeping bitterness. But that, my friends, is what we have to do. We have to have that devotion, wisdom, and divine grace. From all differing faith traditions and from secular wisdom, we learn the value of human life. From my tradition, I read the story of the Garden of Eden with its most profound message that all humanity came from one person. And whether anthropologically accurate or not, the moral point of that story is clear. We are all descended from the same blood. We are all family.
We're all brothers and sisters.
We are all family. We are brothers and sisters and cousins.
That's right.
So look around you right now. Look around. This is your family. Your distant cousins. Your relatives you never knew. We are all family. To eradicate racism, we must remember this most profound message. We are all family. Say it. We are all family. When we meet people in the street, remember, we are all family. When we sit in our schools, we are all family. And when we encounter people at work, we are all family. If we are to eradicate racism, if we are to see all of humanity as one extended family, then we must open our arms to our other family members. We must protect them. We must hear their concerns and help them. But first we must know them. So I ask you now to look around and meet a new family member. Meet a new brother you never knew you had. Meet your sister you never knew you had. Meet your cousin you never knew you had. Turn to a person near you whom you don't know right now, and meet a family member you never knew you had.